Good morning, all. This is Devina from People Matters, and we are back with another exciting virtual session in partnership with Darwinbox on the topic Surefire Ways to Scaling and Engaging Talent, Swiggy case study. According to Gallup, highly engaged teams are 21% more productive than those with low engagement. Engaged employees are innovative and always have an idea or two about what they can do better. With the recent round of funding, not only has Swiggy joined the Unicorn Club, but also emerged as the fifth most valuable startup in India. With current expansion plans, new service offerings, and markets to capture, it is no surprise that Swiggy has been onboarding the best of the talent to drive this journey. For our today's session, we have with us Mr. Girish Menon, Head HR Swiggy, who will take us through the success journey of Swiggy, about the employee engagement initiatives they undertake, the talent management practices they follow, and how technology has been leveraged in the process. A seasoned HR professional, Girish has over a decade of experience and has worked for various organizations like HSBC and Flipkart. Not only has he set up various HR processes in India and MNC startups, he has also spearheaded various strategic initiatives like restructuring, aligning HR practices to drive profitability, talent management strategy, and OD interventions across multiple locations and cross section of employees. We also have with us Mr. Himanshu Kumar, Director Customer Success, Darwinbox. Himanshu leads customer success function at Darwinbox. He has cross-functional experience of more than 10 years, spanning across HR consulting, product development strategy, marketing, and operations. We have saved time for you to ask your questions at the end of this webcast. For those who are live and can simply post questions at any time during session in the comment section on your right side of the screen. We will try to respond to as many questions as time allows. We have an exciting topic to discuss in this webcast today. So, without any further delay, let me invite Girish and Himanshu to take over. Over to you, Himanshu.
Thank you, Devina, and thanks, Girish, for joining us. It is a real privilege to have you here. I'm looking forward to hear and learn from your experience of Swiggy and other organizations on the growth story. So, Girish, I have a presentation to share. If you can give me a minute, I'll just share that presentation.
Yeah, sure. Can you do that? Hi, Devina, and thanks a lot for having me here, and thanks, Himanshu. It's a pleasure to share the story and also learn. I'm also looking forward to the questions today and what I can learn. So I have my pen and paper handy so that I can take notes.
Absolutely. Thanks, Himanshu.
Okay. So, Girish, just sharing the presentation. Just give me a minute. So, Girish will take you through a series of questions to really understand your experience and journey at Swiggy. And again, in our experience of actually dealing with more than 150 plus clients and around 400,000 plus employees on platform, we have seen several growth stories. But honestly, the growth and the scale that Swiggy has grown to is phenomenal. With more than 100 cities in which Swiggy is present, more than 75,000 restaurants to which it has partnered to, having more than 9,000 delivery executives and approximately 8,000 employees. The scale in the past 5 years has been phenomenal. But what most of us often miss from the other side of the table is the careful planning, the number of hours that go in planning and executing this, the rigorous execution across the spectrum in achieving the aspired growth that you have. And this is what we'll touch base on when we are going through this whole webinar, and would like to understand the stories of Swiggy in this whole growth journey. So to start with, Girish, the first question again to you is, in this growth journey, which has been for Swiggy for the past 5 years, are there different stages of growth and different sets of priorities that you saw from a talent perspective?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks. Great question to start with. When I talk about Swiggy's story itself, right, and I just want to add some flavor to the numbers that you shared. So we have around, like you rightly said, we have around 80,000 plus restaurants on our platform in our core business, which is marketplace. We have around 175,000 odd delivery executives that are delivering food day in and day out when the customer orders, and we have 8,000 plus employees. So the other interesting fact is we are doing more than 1.5 million orders a day, which makes us one of the highest transacting platforms in the country and almost like a toothbrush app, which everyone uses every day. Right. So that's kind of been the story, and very happy that Swiggy has also become a verb, because when I talk to people in the family, they just say, we're not ordering food. It's not ordering food anymore. It's swigging food, right? So they end up saying, let's swiggy it, and that's a great story to have, a great feeling to have, that the whole food ordering experience, the name has been now replaced by Swiggy, right? The food ordering is replaced by Swiggy, like how photocopying was replaced by Xerox. And a lot of people think Xerox is photocopying per se, but they don't know it's a brand, right? So the brand, it's become synonymous to the activity of food ordering. And that's a great place to be in, because it really helps us to further expand and capitalize on the strength of the brand that we built. Coming to your question, I think the way we envisaged the organization was largely with three P's, and I've spoken about these three P's in other events and podcasts that I've been a part of. The three P's that were important for us was the purpose, the principles, and the people that we build in the organization. So the purpose was largely, when we started off Swiggy, the purpose was to change the way India eats. We've taken a slightly different elevated purpose more recently, which is to elevate quality of life of urban consumers by providing unparalleled convenience. Right? So from food play, only food play, now we are moving towards a convenience play as an organization. So which means that we are building a new organization within, we are building the muscle for that, we are hiring the right set of people, we're building the technology for it. All of that is happening, and we've taken a different higher level need of solving for any customer friction that a customer can think of. And when I say customer, for us, it's absolutely the end customer, the consumer of Swiggy functions, Swiggy's delivery, and Swiggy's offerings per se, right? So I think the change in the purpose is driving our next level of growth, changing from just changing the way India eats as a purpose to a elevated pitch of changing quality of life of urban consumers through unparalleled convenience is the purpose, or the first P that I want to talk about. The second P is the principles that we have in the organization. That's largely the values that we have created more than 2 years back. We spent almost a year to come out with the 8 values that we have. We had multiple conversations. We really saw what we resonated with, and what are aspirational for us. We did blind voting to ensure that there's no Abelian's paradox being followed in the room, and it was not one man's opinion. So the leadership team got together. We did blind voting, and then we finally came up with the 8 values. So in points of dilemma, if in doubt, and when in doubt, people just go by the values that we have and to take a call, right? So if there's a dilemma which people are facing on the ground, and if there's the right thing to do by the consumer, we just do it, and the values are helping with that. Of course, we also have the greatest strength that I would believe the set of Swiggy is the kind of people that we've hired. We have fantastic set of leaders, middle management, and the food soldiers in the organization. We've selected them with great pride, with a lot of careful. The entire interview process has been very, very robust, I would say, because it's a very participative process that we have in Swiggy. No single manager can take a singular call, but it has to be done by a panel. We do a debrief of the candidate, see for cultural fitment, how the person can fit in the role that we are hiring for, and we make a careful judgment of the person that we hire. The person also gets a chance to interact with the multiple people within the organization to get a sense of the colleagues that they would prospectively work for, and also get a sense of the set of smart people that we have, because smart people always want to work with smart people, and it's the greatest motivation that you can give for anyone who wants to really upgrade themselves in their career. They really want to work with people who can challenge them and who they can learn from. So this process kind of is a win-win. We understand the candidate well, the candidate understands us well, and we take a collective call. And I always believe that collective intelligence is better than individual intelligence. So these are things that are very critical to the Swiggy growth story per se. And I know there are a lot of HR professionals in the call, so I would touch upon some aspects of HR in the growth story, and then I can then take on questions from Himanshu. One thing which I personally have seen working in a startup, and I've worked for multiple startups. This is my third startup, and and I've been here for more than 3 years, a significant part of this Swiggy journey. It's imperative for the HR folks to be ready to move from highly strategic activities to getting things done on the ground. And that's the dexterity that the HR professionals and I would say resilience and tenacity that the HR professionals should build if they want to make a career in startup and also take the startup to a higher level, because you'll be working in absolutely strategic things like, for example, working on designing a ESOP policy for the organization, and the next day you will be hiring sales folks yourselves, right? So it can move from highly strategic to highly tactical, but very important to get done. And I've gone through that journey myself, where each day has been very, very different and at different levels of complexity. Like one story I can think of is, more than I think 2.5 years back, when our sales numbers were pretty low in Delhi NCR, thanks to our competition, and we respect the competition because it helps us to fight harder. They were doing extremely well, and the number of restaurants that we had in Delhi were pretty low. What we call as quality of supply was pretty low. So we actually had to do some immediate steps to ensure that we win the market. So what we did is, no, we didn't sit back in armchair and keep strategizing, but we hit the road. We went to Delhi and we conquered the market. And I'm going to share in a minute, how we did it. So we took few steps. First was the best sales leader was parked in Delhi for a couple of months. He went there. He started building the team along with a recruiter that we parked again from Bangalore, because you can imagine 3 years back we were not as big as what we are today. So the recruiter was parked in Bangalore. We also had sales folks from other parts of the country because we were present in eight states at that point in time. So there were other sales folks we picked from other states, and then we parked them in Delhi. So collectively, what was happening is we were addressing the need for hiring. So we had the recruitment engine in full acceleration with the HR team, with the recruitment team, and the sales leader there. And the sales leader also was kind of galvanizing folks from rest of the country. And in that particular quarter where we did this, what I call the high bias for action phenomenon, the quarter came out extremely well. We actually onboarded more than 3x of what we onboarded in the previous quarter. And that put us back on track in Delhi. And we are very happy to say we're market leaders in Delhi. And if we didn't take that step of taking the bull by its horn or showing extreme bias for action, I don't think it would have been possible, right? So the learning was that I had to actually go down. I was sourcing for sales folks at that point in time, just to show and lead from the front, so that the entire team is galvanized to really hit the sales numbers, supply team hiring numbers at that point in time. And that's one learning which I still have, that be ready to fold your sleeves, go on the ground, grease your hands, and get your hands dirty, but get things done. I think that one quality of getting things done in a startup is very, very important, and every leader needs to live by it and also be ambassador of getting things done.
Great, Girish. I mean, this really ties in with my next question. And I mean, what you really talked about is how the tactical priorities have been changing. So, if you were just to contrast the tactical priorities that you had 3 years ago when you joined Swiggy versus what you have as on date, how would you contrast them? How have they changed over a period of time?
So, Himanshu, the tactical priorities are a part of everyday business. Now,
Mm-hmm.
what changed is we've started thinking more long term. We are thinking of more strategic modes, and we're thinking of where can we invest in adjacent businesses and make a dent in the market. Where one, we solve for large level of problems the consumers have, like I mentioned earlier, and we also become one super app for convenience for consumers, right? So that's been the change. I think the playing field has become larger. Our ambitions have become larger. So it doesn't mean that we don't do tactical. Like even now, the hiring has to be done. But the change from then to now is that we have a team. There is team which is getting it done on the ground, and so the leaders can take some time out and think of more strategic priorities. So the way we structured is that there are teams on the ground which is running day-to-day machinery, and then there are teams thinking of strategy and what next, right, from a mid to long-term perspective. And when I say mid to long-term perspective, it's very different from a startup. from when you compare to a large organization, because when we talk long term, we are again talking about 2 to 3 years time, and when we talk about getting things done now, it's more of a year than what it was earlier. It was more of a quarter, right? So
Mhm.
I think that's been the shift in the last. In August, we complete 5 years. I think from second year to now, that's the primary shift.
Mhm. So, Girish, I mean, again, one of the what we have seen, one of the key challenges for any of the startups is a clear definition of jobs that is lacking. So, you don't know what is a clear predictor for success. How do you really deal with the ambiguity on both numbers and skill sets that you would require, and especially that you're getting into a new service line and have a new vision for the organization as such? How do you really deal with that ambiguity?
So it's a great question because and that's one reason why we didn't get into a full-fledged job evaluation per se. While purist HRs would say do a job evaluation and then do your JDs and then do your competencies, so on and so forth. What we primarily did is we built high-level structures so that there is less confusion, but there was enough fluidity built into the system, right? So that when the organization moves at a pace, we don't become slave to processes and slave to structures. The problem with being too structured is you also become too rigid,
Mm-hmm.
right? So what I mean by that is we have JDs. To your
Mm-hmm.
question, right? We have created JDs and for the unique roles that we have in the company, and there are more than 300 plus unique roles, and we have created JDs for that. But what we've kept loose is, for example, at a particular level and above, the whole IJP process, or which is different in large organization, is very fluid. So there's a need for a talent to move at a slightly higher level in the organization. It's absolutely the prerogative and the willingness of the individual, prerogative of the management, and we are happy to move talent if it makes sense for the organization and the talent at the whole. Right. So those are things that we've kept pretty fluid, and to ensure that we have the right set of practices which are structured, which are structured but not too structured, which provides fluidity, right? So coming back to JD, we have high level JDs. We're not really fretting over the perfection of JDs. High level JD of what people would do, because even when you look at performance management, right, while the KRAs are largely common across say 2 quarters, the KPIs can rapidly change. Like for example, if we decide to accelerate our quality of supply, a team which was onboarding 100 residents suddenly needs to onboard 300 residents, right? So we need to have that fluidity. And again, if you look at it from a HR point of view, the recruitment numbers can be completely ballistic, right? You can have a quarter where you are hiring 100 sales folks, and the next quarter you are hiring 300 sales folks. So it's very important to build a team, a structure, and the attitude which is open to fluidity. So when I mean team, the leadership, and the teams should be open to take more in certain quarters. And when I say attitude, it's your mindset, right? It's your growth mindset. As long as the organization is growing, how do I not really go back and tell this is not a part of my JD, but how do I really stretch and make it happen is the attitude I'm talking about. And I'm talking structures. I'm talking about can we build variability or structures which can help for peaks and troughs, right? So in recruitment, we have a significant portion of a recruitment team which is staffed by RPOs, recruitment process outsourcing, and
Mm-hmm.
these guys help us to scale up when there is immediate impetus required. And if we don't need, and if there's going to be 2 quarters which is kind of placid, then we can remove them. So there's some level of fluidity that we built in the structures as well. So from the ambiguity point of view, what I'm trying to tell you is, while it's important to have structure, don't make it too structured so that it becomes rigid and you become slaves to processes and structures in a startup, especially in the first 5 to 6 years of your evolution.
Great, right. Completely agree there, Girish. And I mean, just moving on to the next slide, and what we have seen and also observed in our experience, and it is also proven by certain research done by Lightspeed, 41% of new age organizations miss their hiring goals. And you touch based on this, saying that you have RPOs in place, but would like to understand a little more on how do you really work around it, because in again a agile business ecosystem things might change pretty fast, and when notice period especially for key talent is around 2 months 3 months, when the whole business requirement might change in 2 months 3 months. So how do you really go about this? How do you really keep your whole internal system, talking to business agile, the whole RPOs agile, and get the right talent.
Yeah, even before, and I think it's a very valid point because you're working in a real market, right? How much ever you want, your locus of control is not necessarily completely with you. So
Hmm.
I appreciate the question that you asked. Even before going that, we've gone through what I articulate as four stages of Swiggy. And it's important for me to talk about that, if you're okay, Himanshu, because it kind of
Yes.
gives you a sense of how it's been from a talent acquisition point of view,
Right. Right.
right? So I think the first year of Swiggy, which is 2014 to around 2015, end of 2015, it was more about will Swiggy survive, or what is Swiggy, because people didn't know what Swiggy was or will Swiggy survive. And in that period, it was very important to get people through network. That's where the CEO Harsha would have got people from his batches, of people that he knew of, people that he's worked with, and then they got people they worked with, they have studied with, so on and so forth, right? So the first phase of what is Swiggy was all about network effect. How much of network can you capitalize, right? And so in that phase, you can't be too much of a chooser because you're actually looking at getting talent that you want to attract, but you be careful about hiring from your network. It also has a blind spot that you're hiring only from your network. You're not necessarily looking at the larger market, right?
Mhm.
That's the first phase of what is Swiggy. Second phase was why Swiggy. This was more around 2016 to around 2017, where the question was, why should we join Swiggy? Right? Yeah, I've heard of Swiggy. I've ordered it for a couple of times, but why should I join Swiggy? As in, what's the reason that I should join Swiggy? And not everyone was, risk taking. You have people of different characteristics, and it's not necessarily easy at the beginning of your startup journey to get the talent that you want. So the second stage of Vice Wiki is where we really had to invest in talking to people outside. That's where we started our employer branding kind of journey, right? That's when we also signed up with Darwin, if I remember right. 2016 is when we signed up with Darwin. That's the time I joined, early 2016. And that's a time where we really had to show that this is a professionally run organization. And there was also doubts around the unit economics on whether the business is sustainable. So we were all out to ensure to the world that it is a sustainable business. We can make money if run well. And from a talent point of view, we were absolutely spraying and praying. Like, we were going all out of the market. We were there on LinkedIn. We were in job adverts. We were calling people, and we're trying to get the largest funnel possible. As the catchment had to be increased, the top of the funnel had to be increased, and we wanted to have conversations with maximum talent possible at that point in time, right? So the second phase of why Swiggy was spray and pray. While hiring leaders in Swiggy, we've always been careful about, and I'll come to that in a minute. Second phase of why Swiggy was more spray and pray. Then the third phase happened is we want to have a chat with Swiggy, right? We want Swiggy, but we'll have a conversation. Let's have a conversation. That was the third phase, which was more 2017 and early 2000, late 2017 and early 2018, where people were open to have chats with us and have a conversation. That's where we started moving from spray and pray to aim and shoot, right? So we
Mhm.
started looking at what kind of talent we want. Like, for example, we said we'll hire some business leaders from FMCG. We can look at talent from telco. We were looking at engineering talent to come from e-commerce and large e-commerce companies which have seen scale and robustness. So we started then aiming and shooting at the talent that we want in that stage. And today, luckily, we are in the stage where they're saying we love Swiggy, we want to join Swiggy, right? So from why Swiggy, from what Swiggy, why Swiggy, we want to have a conversation to we would love to join Swiggy, is the faces that we've seen in the evolution of last 5 years of Swiggy. And this is a stage where we are really tightening our hiring process because there's a good top line that we have. The funnel is large. We're really looking at the best talent to join us, and we have more choice at this point in time. Having said that, in certain pockets, we always face a supply demand problem, like certain aspects in engineering, in architect side or in data sciences is always a problem because the supply itself is too sparse in the market. So that's the four stages of Swiggy of, what is Swiggy to why should I join Swiggy, want to have a conversation with Swiggy, and we love joining Swiggy. That's a phase that we've seen in the last 5 years. And each phase, like I told you, had different strategy for us. So all in the webcast today, don't beat yourself if you're not getting exactly what you want. Be more tolerant, more resilient to your approach. You will go through these phases, and it's important to identify which phase you are in so that you can make the right investments and the right strategy. Right.
Great.
So that's the
So,
whole journey. And I'll take 2 minutes to answer your question, Himanshu.
mhm.
So yeah, notice periods are a challenge, especially for talents at senior levels. But good thing, like I mentioned, is in the stages of evolution, we've always been patient about the talent we hire. And given the hiring process that we have, which is, like I told, very participative, and even the candidate gets a good sense of what they're getting into, we've had very, very low conversion or dropout rate in non-tech per se. In non-tech, the dropout rates have been less, in very, very less numbers, single digit, early single digits is what we've had. Especially the leadership has been very healthy, where that's where we lose time, right? If you offer someone and then they've served 60 days of notice, and towards one week to joining us, if they drop out, then it's going to hurt us.
Mhm.
Luckily, we've not had many instances of that, because one, the interview process itself is very engaging for the candidate. And we also have a very clear engagement plan with certain candidates post offer. So from post offer to their joining, we have engagement plan which we have, and we execute that pretty religiously. And those are two things we've done to ensure that we don't have too many surprises.
Right, Girish, and yeah, I mean, non-tech, I completely agree. But how do you really hire or manage the tech hiring? And again, if I understand the market right, the conversion as an offer to onboarding ratio is somewhere around 60 to 70%. So with 30% dropouts, and I'm not sure if Swiggy is experiencing the same, how do you really manage and forecast and provide for it?
Yeah, absolutely right. And that's why I kept saying non-tech, because tech is a different ball game. And I wanted to be very, very clear that tech, the dropout rates across the industry has been around 30 to 40%. We've had quarters where it's gone worse, but we pulled it back. So two things we do, Himanshu. One is we plan to increase the top of the funnel, the catchment, and the total number of people coming into the pool, and the number of offers we make for a particular role. Also, we have a math to it. So we basically do the waterfall, and
Mhm,
then every stage we buffer for the dropout that can happen.
mhm.
Right. So
Okay.
that's one way we address the overall dropout ratio. What we've done extensively is to have a very strong post offer engagement plan for engineering folks, especially in SD2, SD3, which is the slightly more experienced engineers, 4 to 8 years of experience in development. We have a very tight engagement plan with them. So that's also helped us to kind of reduce the dropout ratio. But yeah, the numbers are very different. Non-tech and tech is definitely not comparable. Like I told you, non-tech is single digit, tech is still double digit. But we've definitely made progress in terms of how do we address the top of funnel itself and the post-offer engagement with the
Mhm.
candidates.
Great. So I'm just going back to a couple of points that you mentioned, Girish, and I'm just linking them together. So one point that you mentioned is in any of your hiring, it is very participative, or any decision making is very participative, and also touching base on the flexibility on JDs that you have today to provide the fluidity in the system. Now, again, how do you bring a bit of science to the whole recruitment process when there is a participative uh, say interview or screening or selection process, and there is a flexibility on JD? How do you really get the right talent?
So one thing is we generally stay away from, which I've seen other startups do, is we generally stay away from let's hire the talent if we find one and we'll figure a job, right? That creates a lot of confusion in the system. So while we have some bench, what we call in the CEO's office or a strategy pool, we clearly identify a set of 3 to 5 people and where there is ambiguity in the role, and we communicate that to prospective candidates that we don't have a fixed role for you, and this is going to be like a SWAT team. Are you interested? So that's how we deal with building bench strength. As far as the other part is concerned, the larger hiring, we are very clear on we hire talent for a particular role. There is fitment to the organization and there is fitment to the role itself, right? So when we do the participative hiring process, we've identified competencies for the role. And the competencies will have both cultural aspects of larger org fitment and also skills, knowledge, and attitude required to do that particular role. And that's actually tested by the interviewers in the process. So, like I said, there are 5 to 6 interviewers, and typically there are 6 to 7 competencies that we check. So we map each of the competencies to the interviewers, and we have a clear debrief on that. What we've also done is we've introduced and we're training people on using behavioral event interview as a technique, so that the quality of interviewing and the whole output of the efficiency of the interviewing process goes up. So for the last 3 months, we've been training people on behavioral event interviewing, and that's something that we are taking up very seriously. And there is a team internally which is running this whole certification process of people getting certified on using BEI as a tool. We also do shadow and reverse shadow, meaning if there is a new person who's joined the organization, we get them to shadow with someone who's already got experience of interviewing in Swiggy, and the person needs to go and undergo certain number of shadows and reverse shadow before they start interviewing. Right. So those are steps that we've taken proactively. Third, a reactive step we've taken is we also do the candidate experience survey of people who got interviewed with us, selected and not selected as well, and then take pointed feedback on how the interview experience was. We also tie that loop back to the quality of interview. So I think all the input metrics we are doing right, from making the participative interview process much better and robust. Another area that we're working now is also looking at assessments for certain roles. We are looking at accentuating the whole the process and enhancing it by adding some assessments, and that's something which we are working on. We can use assessments as both filtering mechanism and also selection mechanism. We're choosing which role to use what, and as a combination of BEA and assessments, I think we'll be in a much better position.
Great. So, Girish, again, with so many people coming in, how do you keep or ensure that a performance culture is driven across the organization?
Sure. So, one of the things that I had started off when I joined is to provide people with the skill of giving feedback. Right. I think feedback itself is a skill, and I don't think people have given enough importance to creating that culture where feedback is shared and feedback is shared well in the right way. So when talking about performance and how do you keep a performance culture, the most important aspect was for line managers to be equipped to give feedback to their teams and also to take feedback. Right. So there are a couple of things we did. Firstly, we introduced the concept of giving feedback, and we mandated that for all line managers. So there was a theory session we did, and then we slowly moved that into practical labs. So this performance feedback labs that we've been running for the last 2.5 years, where line managers actually practice giving feedback in the labs. And it typically happens before October and April, which is our appraisal cycle. So people can actually come and practice providing feedback, right? So that the quality of conversation goes up. We have a couple of rituals in the company which we do very regularly. One is a pulse survey which we do, which also has questions around overall culture of the organization, performance culture, and then we draw action plans on that. And we also do a survey called the managerial effectiveness survey, which is very pointed 90-degree upward survey, where the team members can rate and give feedback to their line managers. Right. So we take inputs from these two surveys and then triangulate and see whether the line manager is setting the right expectation, is he giving the right set of feedback, so on and so forth. Right. So that's one aspect. Second aspect is our PMS system itself has been pretty disciplined. So there are two aspects of PMS, right? And it's important for us as HRs to understand. In most of the organizations, I've seen that there is a tick in the box kind of a PMS system which is running, and there's a separate performance which is actually driven by business, right? And these two typically don't talk to each other. HR is busy driving, have you filled your feedback form, have you had your conversation, and you typically don't even audit the conversations or train people to have a good conversation, but you're just ensuring that the process is done, and efficiency or efficacy of the process is not necessarily there. What we did is we ensured that the discipline is in place first. So meaning the conversations are happening, the conversations are happening basis goals which have been set. People are having performance conversation regularly. So we had introduced something called a quarterly check-in 3 years back, where every quarter we were nudging people to give us feedback on whether the line managers are having conversation with them. That also became a part of the managerial effectiveness survey. So we're trying to tie up loops across the organization on what behavior we want to drive. And the quarterly check-ins started then driving the conversations, and the quality of conversations were improved by the performance feedback. So the entire discipline part of PMS was fixed. So very proud to say that every year in the last 3 years, we've had PMS run on time. And for people from large organizations, they might be thinking what I'm or wondering what I'm talking about. But in most startups, the PMS gets delayed,
Mhm.
right? It doesn't happen on time. You target saying you'll close it by April, it doesn't happen just because the systems are not mature enough, right? But I can proudly say that every year, year on year, we've ensured that the PMS closes on March 31st, the increments are credited, the bonuses are paid out. And that's also thanks to one, the offline processes, and also the online tools that we have. The entire PMS for us runs on Darwin. In the last 2 years, it's been running on Darwin, and it's been running pretty seamlessly. Even this PMS in April, we closed it on the end of the month, and we've closed the PMS, right? So that's the discipline part. Now, to your question on how do you keep the performance culture high in an agile business dynamic environment, we've started working on a concept called OKR, Himanshu. I don't know
Mhm.
how many would know about this. It's a very interesting concept started by John Doerr. It was
Yeah.
pioneered in IBM earlier, and many organizations, including Google, had adopted OKR in some format. My erstwhile employer as well had adopted Flipkart in some format.
Mhm.
OKR brings in a great amount of alignment between teams because teams call out dependency, and also makes you take stretch goals and aspire to reach that, right? So it clarifies a lot of ambiguity in terms of resource allocation, in terms of dependency, in terms of how much you can stretch, what you can take, what you can't take. So it's a great prioritization tool as well. We've started using OKR in the last quarter or so, and we're seeing good early feedback. I can't say results yet, but we're seeing good early feedback because people are having very clear views on their goals. They're calling out dependencies. They are doing resource planning very, very carefully to achieve the OKRs. And then I think that's going to be another very important aspect for us as we keep growing at the pace at which we are, where we not just focus on the discipline side of PMS, but also focus on the efficiency slash efficacy side of PMS, which I think OKR will be a good solve.
Mhm. So, Girish, do you see a difference between performance management in a new age org and a rapidly growing startup like Swiggy versus any established organization?
I do see, and I think the large organizations are also adapting the more agile practices today, the way I see it. And I worked in a couple of large organizations like City and HSBC. Things were pretty settled there. So performance management was a more, I would say, dormant kind of a system, as in you didn't have too many changes. You wouldn't use words like dynamic to describe how performance management would be in large organizations. They have their own set of challenges of managing scale, ensuring that compliance is high, ensuring that the business runs BAU, all of that. It's a different set of challenges in the large organization, but performance management, I think, is very different there, given the different set of priorities. It's more settled. It's more it's more sunk into the system. People are aware of what it is. I would say that the system itself has matured. So it's quite unfair to compare both. In
Mhm.
startup, you need the performance management to absolutely talk to the organization, the way the organization is moving. It has to be more frequent. So if you see the framework of fast, and you would have heard of SMART goals
Yeah.
before, the specific, measurable, all that, achievable, realistic, time bound. I think what the fast framework talks about is making the conversations more frequent, having the goals more ambitious. S stands for being specific, and T stands for being transparent. So we see the fast model of frequent, ambitious, specific, and transparent goals. It's very different from a SMART goal because the OKR system, for example, makes your goals transparent to your teams and the extended teams, right?
Mhm.
So there is you have an obligation to connect. You have an obligation to go and call for dependencies. People know that what they are working for and how does it tie to the larger strategy of the organization. I think that's the primary shift in a startup which is required. So while smart works for the large organizations, I think fast works better for the agile and more startup kind of organizations.
Right, no, and completely agree there, Girish, on the fast methodology. And I mean, that's where again, from our experience, one of the challenges in implementing performance management across organizations that we have seen is the adoption of the system. When again with OKR methodology or anything, leveraging technology becomes essential, and the business adopting the system really becomes a challenge. How have you really driven business adoption of technology in Swiggy?
See, there's still a lot of improvement to be done there. To be frank, I'm not saying we are at the pinnacle of success there. But good thing is the like I mentioned to you, the entire PMS happens to us on system. There is no offline system. So as much as you can put your key processes onto the system, there is a incentive for the business to log into the system and use it. I think the adoption will go high. What the approach which typically HRs have taken is to to chase up, saying there is a system, go and use it, and put a tracker in terms of how many have used it, how many have not used it. I think it's a very old school kind of a process. What you
Mhm,
need to do is to have the system itself engaging. So, for example, if we can get our real-time pulse onto the system, there'll be
mhm,
more than one reason for the business to actually use it on a daily basis,
mhm.
right? So that's the thought process that we have, and that's the thought process that I want my team to think through and partners to think through in terms of how do we make the system itself engaging, that the business needn't be pushed to use the system, but the business is pulled to come to the system.
Right,
I think that's going to be strategic, a lever that we need to use in terms of using technology and adoption of technology.
right. So again, in this changing ecosystem, how do you really drive retention? Hiring is one challenge, but retention is altogether another beast to manage.
Right. Yeah, so if you look at startups, right, as in the millennial crowd and the rest of the crowd, really looking at creating impact, really looking at flexibility in working, really looking at taking large roles, right? So for engagement, what we've done is while we have all the typical engagement budget and your parties and so on and so forth, I think those are nice things to do. What really drives engagement and retention is providing people with opportunities to actually contribute to the organization and have meaningful jobs. Right? When I say that, what I mean and how does it reflect in policies, like I mentioned, at a level and above, we have people movement pretty fluid. So we don't say you have to spend 24 months in a role to get to the next role, which is typically there in a large organization. The people who join us are highly ambitious people. They're capable and they want to prove a point to themselves and to the larger ecosystem. So we have to give them that stage to play. So the policy that the way it reflects in policy is the fluidity that I mentioned. So you'll be happily surprised to see that some key initiatives that we have or key departments are actually headed by people who are sub 30, and that's
Mhm,
something which will not happen very easily in a large organization. Like for example, the entire corp development initiative of ours is headed by someone who's sub 30. There are two large businesses that we are experimenting now, and one is already taken off, which is the Swiggy stores,
mhm,
delivery of anything to consumers from from the departmental provision stores nearby supermarkets. That business, which is now piloted in Gurgaon, and we're going to expand that. That's headed by someone who's sub 30. The strategic account management in the whole kitchens business that we've set up is headed by, which we call Axis, is also headed by someone who's sub 30. So there are enough examples of people who've got very, very important roles. As long as they've shown the performance and potential, we've kept the policies and even biases at bay to ensure that the right set of people get the right set of opportunities. So that's, I think, a great engagement or a retention, because when others see that people get an opportunity, as long as it's not the age which matters, but it's the ability and your results that matter, people really look forward to being in an organization like this where they're working with smart people are growing, and then they see that they can also emulate the leaders that they see and can grow in the organization.
right. But one typical again challenge that we have faced personally, and also I have seen in multiple organizations, is in a startup kind of a ecosystem. How do you really manage between people who have spent time in the system and have a lot of context? For example, people who have been there with you for the past 4 years, versus key employees and high performers who have joined maybe in the last 6 months or 1 year? How do you really bring the right balance across these two set of employees?
Right, it's a great question. So, and I was reading your questions, old and key employees. I was thinking, why can't it be a concatenated format of old key employees, right? The ones who are old but who are key. So it doesn't mean that you just because they've spent 4 years, you put them in a higher pedestal. It's very important for you to really assess the ones who have the ability, who've shown the track record of performance, and also have the capability to take to the next organization, to take the organization to the next level. So we choose people, who've shown that promise. And while this has happened more inorganically, we've also started to work on putting processes which can enable this, like identifying talent, giving them the right set of exposure across multiple facets of the business so that they can become a good category leader for the future. That's something which is work in progress. So for me, more than old or key, it's old and key. Old key employees have to be in critical roles. There are some people who can't scale up, so we don't give them that kind of charters. There are employees who scaled up but not scaled big enough to become functional heads. So we've hired people senior to them, but we've given key portfolios under a large mandate to people who've got that potential. So it's all about mapping the right set of people to the right set of roles that you have in the organization.
So, Girish, just to, again, summarize the whole experience and your learning journey in Swiggy, if there were three do's and three don'ts that you were to recommend to people who have joined in, from a talent management perspective in a new age scaling organization, what would those be?
So I would say keep it flexible. Don't be slave to structures. Be open to experimentation. So flexibility is one aspect that I'll talk about. Keep watching for speed of execution, both in decision making and how fast you move as an organization, because it's very easy to slow down and become bureaucratic. So watch out for speed. And third is don't build controls. Don't control but build control. So what I mean by that is build some discipline, like for example, like the PMS that we spoke about or conversations. It's important to have a structure, but it's also important to ensure that it's not just for the sake of saying, yeah, it happens like this in large organizations, but be very relevant. So the third point is relevance. While you want to build discipline, build relevant disciplines. So
Mhm.
flexibility, speed, and relevance is what I would say as three key aspects from a startup perspective. So don'ts would be typically opposite to that, right? Don't be too rigid. Don't get clouded by your own success, because the things are moving pretty rapidly. So you'll have to be open to change your own convictions. So while you have strong convictions, hold them loosely in a startup, and always be curious to learn. If you think that you arrived, then I think that's the end in a startup. So it's very important to be humble and be always curious to keep learning. So don't be too full of yourself. Don't think you've arrived is the third point.
Would you want to share any failure story, Girish? And typically for all the journeys, we are success stories. But is there one failure that you clearly remember and has been a milestone in terms of learning?
Well, the Swiggy story itself is a failure story, right? As in Harsha and Nandan, who are the founders of Swiggy, actually started Swiggy as a courier aggregation company,
Right.
B2B, and that's how our parent company is still called Bundle Technologies.
Yeah.
And while they saw there's a need in the market to do courier aggregation, over a point in time, they realized that it's not a big enough market, and they didn't have the right to win there. So from there, they pivoted to food delivery, and they were resilient. So they didn't give up because they failed. And today, all of us know what Swiggy is and what size the organization has grown. So the Swiggy story itself is on a firm foundation of failure.
Great. Thanks for that, Girish. So that's all from my side. Devina, I would like to hand it over to you to
Sure.
take it back and have the questions.
Sure. So thank you, Girish and Himanshu, for your great insights. We will now move to the questions from our attendees. The first question is by Pranav, where he asks, one of the reasons startups do not do well and mostly fail is the unnecessary hiring of middle management. Startup need strategists who do not mind actually executing the work at ground level and executioner with great strategic thinking and business acumen. So how much do you agree on this?
Yeah, so it's a valid point. Like I mentioned, when Himanshu asked the question, I've seen many startups saying, okay, we have the money now, we need to build a team, so just let's hire talent. I think it's very important while you don't, like I told you, don't make their life too constrained, but you need to have some guardrails when you're building your system, right? You need to have some processes. You need to hire a talent for a particular role. Those are things that we need to be careful about. These are simple things which, simple rules which I spoke, but doesn't get followed much, right? So you get tempted to just overhire, then you're hiring for people not necessarily fitting into your role. Then it also becomes that the people inside are confused and they're not doing much, and then there's negativity within saying I'm not utilized well. So there's a lot of snowball effect which is there. So it's important for you to have a clear view of your what's the numbers that you're hiring and what kind of talent you're hiring, and hire the talent for a particular role so that they have a mandate to work on. And if you have a specific need to build a bench strength, then call that out. But the entire approach of hiring can't be just bench strength, right? You can have a very specific strategy for that. So it's very important to identify those and clearly call out those, and make the organization execute it seamlessly, right? Have a tight hold, and keep going back with governance, call it out, have some guardrails is what I would say.
So I would just add to that question a bit, Girish, and the way I have seen it going wrong for many organizations is they hire for a certain sales projection, and once they hire, after that, if say the sales projection goes awry, how do you really then treat that talent? Because now your sales numbers have not been met.
See, that's a very tricky situation to be in. I think that's poor planning to start with, right?
Mhm.
You'll always have to hire talent with a stretch, meaning you hire a talent, make them stretch so that you're not creating flab, or there's no social loafing that you're encouraging in the system. Let them stretch to 120%, 130%, especially in the starting stages of a startup, right? As in the first year, second year, you want people to stretch. You want one person to do 1.5 person's job,
Right.
right? And once you really find a need to add headcount, that's when you need to add headcount. The simple one line that between Harsha and I we kept talking was, are we hiring for pain or pleasure? Right.
Great.
So in the initial stages of startup, it's always hiring for pain, right? After you get some funding, then you can maybe hire for R&D and labs, and that's more of long-term thinking and making life easier. But I think the first few years, especially first 3 years, it's all about hiring for pain, and that we need to call out with the line managers and build that
Very
culture.
valid point. Yeah.
Great. So the next question is from Ashutosh, where he asks about at early stage, hiring of talent depends on the technological decisions made in a startup. For instance, tech frameworks to choose React Native, oblique Angular, AWS, GCP, etc., among many other necessary steps to be taken. So, how to better make these decisions, and what has been your experience whenever mapping tech decisions to talent needed?
See, I have a different take on this. So what we've seen is the technology keeps upgrading. So we need people with absolutely good skills, no denial there. So, but we need good development skills. As long as they're good developers, and we have full stack developers, the technology keeps upgrading. So we need to check for the learnability in the candidate, right? As long as there is good acumen, basics, sharps or smarts which you check, and what you need to check attitudinally is the ability to learn. What has he learned more recently? What is that he was comfortable but didn't help, right? What did he have to learn new to succeed in his last job? Those are questions that one need to ask repeatedly to understand what's the learnability of the candidate. As much as you want to hire for a specific skill, I think the skill itself changes. So I think the learnability quotient becomes very important in the interview, especially in the engineering side.
So the next question comes from Apurv, where he asks about what is the strategy Swiggy follows for IT candidate hiring and onboarding.
Great. So there seems to be a lot of interest from IT and engineering. I'm quite happy to see that. So we've had a different, like I mentioned, the different phases that we had. We had different stages in engineering hiring as well. Initially, we hired a lot of people with lateral experience because we didn't have a middle management. We were only building it in the first 3 years. What we've done more recently in the last 1 year is we are also hiring engineers from campus. Like as we speak, there's a healthy number of people coming from campuses to join us. So what we do is we create a clear career path. The freshers come into the entry level of engineering, which is called SD1 in most of the startup organizations, or software development engineer or software engineer. From there, we create growth path for them, and we clearly set what competency will take them to the next level. right? So the entry level hiring is largely now 30 to 40% done through campuses, and that's been a shift in strategy in tech hiring or IT hiring. While the more senior roles, we still go to the market. The middle management now is actually being filled by people internally, as we are filling at the beginning of the pyramid or the bottom of the pyramid. Slowly, the talent which is there is also getting up, getting higher in the ladder. So middle management is now getting filled by people internally.
So the next question is also from Apur, where he asks about what are the engagement activities that Swiggy follows to engage the talent before getting them on board.
Okay, so before talent comes on board, we've done a variety of things, starting from sending bouquet to their houses to a couple of conversations with the line manager. We've also got people to come to our office and visit our office before they join, and actually spend some time to see what kind of problems people are working on, and they get a better sense culturally because when they come and spend time, because in an interview typically you're in best of your form, right? You want to tell all the right things, right? You want to look good, you want to give answers to all the questions. Interviewer is also looking at it from a very critical lens. But the minute they come and see the office, they also get a sense of what Swiggy is culturally. So getting them to office even before they join, spend some time engaging with them is something that we've done over a period of time.
So we have Gargi who asks about what are the initiatives taken towards development of talent in startups. Do you really spend on formal training or development or focus more on learning on the job?
Great. So again, I think it's a matter of priority and strategy. Most of the HR leaders undermine the impact that learning can have, and I don't blame them because you're also running against tight budgets when you start up, right, in the first 1 year or so. So good thing is we invested a lot in cascading values as a part. It's not necessarily learning and development, but it's org development. We invested in cascading values. What we also did early is we started investing in managerial effectiveness and leadership effectiveness, right? So if we were to split into functional training and behavioral training, in functional training we prioritize two areas, which was operations and supply. Operations is the absolute front end which goes and delivers to customers, that we prioritized, and we also prioritized the sales folks who go and meet the restaurants. Those two areas we prioritized functionally, and from a behavioral point of view, we focused on managerial effectiveness and leadership effectiveness, so that the overall leadership quality of the organization as Swiggy goes up. That's something which we started even 2.5 years back. So we had clear plans for managers. There were training programs. There were post training engagements that we did, post training engagements that we did for managerial effectiveness and leadership effectiveness. We started working with people who managers, and we had clear mandates. There was classroom session. We had some post classroom coaching calls. All of that is something which we invested, which typically doesn't happen in a very early stage startup, but we started early. We identified that building the managerial skills and leadership skill is very important for the organization. So that's something that we invested. From a tech point of view, most of them learn on the job. We've also invested now in terms of going to forums, talking to peers in other organizations. So we have a program called Swiggy Bits and Swiggy Bytes. Swiggy Bits is a platform where people share within the engineering org, within Swiggy. Swiggy Bytes is where we invite engineers from outside, and then leaders interact with the folks from outside. So we've done a couple of sessions there. So this is basically through knowledge sharing. So tech learning is primarily through on the job, challenging projects that they have, and also through knowledge sharing.
So this is the last question that we have from Namrata, where she asks, with HR evolving towards technology, how and where do you draw the balance between making it effective through technology, yet keeping the human-centric connect alive, which is typically the more conventional way she wants to know.
Yeah, I think it's a very important point because as HR we should not lose touch, right? Finally, human beings is still proven that we like to talk. It's not like we don't like to talk. We want the personal touch which is there. The way we are thinking about tech is to actually look at tech enabling touch. So it's tech and touch in Swiggy. Just one simple example which I can give you is that the entire values cascade when we did 2 years back was absolutely non-tech. We actually traveled to every city and we used storytelling as a format because it's the first time we were launching it, right? And at that point in time, we were 8 cities and we were 2,000 odd employees. But today we are in 140 cities and we're 8,000 plus employees. So even if I decide to travel, I think I'll take the entire year to cover the cities now. So it's almost impossible for us to do, right? So while it's important to have the touch, we use tech now. So for the whole values cascade, we've created a tech solution where people can actually see videos of leaders, can also take quiz online, and also nominate people on the ones who really showcased values as values ambassadors. So there is tech now adding on to the touch. So from a touch perspective, what we're doing in values is Harsha and I still do a town hall only for new joiners to talk about the vision, that's the purpose of the organization, principle, which is the values. We do a separate town hall for the new joiners and they join from across India, where we talk to them face to face like this on a video conference and physically in the office. So we do both. So we're not saying we will not touch or we will not use face to face interaction, we will use it, but we'll also use technology to really amplify and reach out to people sooner. So I think rather than thinking of tech or touch, I think you should think of tech and touch, and where do you want to use what more. Like, for example, performance appraisal conversation, I would always say do face to face. It's much better than using technology because it's finally about human interactions.
Great. And with this question and answer session, we are going to wrap up today's webcast. We have many more questions coming in, which I would request the speakers to take offline. And
Sure.
I would like to thank our today's webcast partner, Darwinbox, and our speakers for the invaluable information. Meanwhile, you can provide your feedback in the survey link provided in the chat section because your input matters. Stay tuned for many more such exciting sessions. And this concludes today's webcast. Thank you and have a great day.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Devina. Thanks, Girish.
Thank you.
Thanks.